Seated next to Norm is Pamela Nichols. Now, Pamela joined the Women Royal Australian Naval Service in 1943 as a telegraphist and received intercepted messages from Japanese ships. After officer training, she then served as a ciphers officer in Townsville before transferring to Melbourne, where she completed a course in censorship. Pamela was serving in Sydney when peace was declared. Welcome, Pamela. Now, as I mentioned, Pamela joined the RAND service in 1943 as a telegraphist. She had an interesting time. I think the federal cabinet decided somewhat reluctantly that women should be able to serve in non-combatant roles. Pamela, tell us about your experiences.
Well, unlike Norm, my memory is very, very unreliable. So forgive me that I have written my story out. Actually, I can't tell you too much about...
Microphone, please.
Oh, sorry. Did anybody hear that?
Yes.
And I repeat? No. Oh, okay. I can't tell you too much about what I did because of the fact that I had to swear top secrecy. But I'll tell you about my life during that time in the RANDs. The Australian government was at last informed the people that the Japanese bombed once, just once, of Darwin. It was December 1942, and sitting for my European history exam in arts journalism at Melbourne University, my thoughts were more of Japanese troops tramping through Asia than Hannibal's rape of Europa. I walked out of the Great Hall and into the Naval Recruiting Bureau. With reluctance, my mother gave her consent because I was under 21. Knowing me, she knew objections would be met with counter-argument. The Navy gave me Christmas at home, my last for 4 years, and January saw me on a train bound for Harmon Naval Depot, 5 miles out of Canberra. I was 19. The compartment on that train held 5 other young women, all new recruits, and amongst them was Lorna Ems, who was to become my dearest and closest friend until her death some 10 years ago. Arrived at Harmon, we were housed in cottage number 5. In peacetime, Harmon had been a permanent naval base for naval personnel and their families. Our cottage comprised 3 bedrooms, a kitchen with a wood fire stove, use forbidden, and a bathroom with a chip bath heater. No fuel was provided, so it was a cold wash. I was used to a morning hot shower. On the first opportunity, I hied into Canberra and bought an electric jug. For bathing, Lauren and I would collect sticks and small branches from the surrounding paddocks and get into the bath together, as the water was cold by the time one had bathed. One girl disdained the cold water and only bathed on her monthly leave at home. Luckily, Lauren and I shared the small back bedroom. Our 6-week training period was interrupted by 2 weekend visits to Sydney to have our uniforms made, the first for measurements and the second for fitting. I think we were the last group to be afforded this luxury. The authorities realised the RANDs had come to stay. We were then fitted with greatcoats, a hat, a pair of shoes, tie, 2 white shirts, 2 pairs of large stockings, and 2 pairs of bloomers. Needless to say, we supplemented all articles at our own expense. After 6 weeks' training, we were considered qualified to go on watch. We were a special group called Y, connected to Bletchley Park, if anybody knows Bletchley Park in London, which intercept Japanese radio messages to and from their ships. The most sensitive of these was the frequency, changed often, used by their submarines. I hated the responsibility attached to this duty. Sitting for 6 hours, scanning the airwaves, terrified you might miss a signal, thereby putting our ships and men in danger. Fortunately, your term came only about once a week. Excuse me. Leave to go to Melbourne came once a month. The train would leave at night from Queanbeyan to Albury, and then we would take the slow train home. Lauren and I would commandeer the luggage racks. The others would hoist up, appreciating the space vacated by us. The rigid iron racks would leave a pattern on our coats, but at least we could stretch out and somehow sleep. Connecting at Albury, our train would be preceded by the non-stop Spirit of Progress. This arrived at 11:30 and we discovered that we could get on. If we could get on it, we could race to Myers before closing time on the Saturday. When the Spirit arrived in Albury, Lauren and I would board and hide in the toilet, door unlocked, until it had left the platform. We would then emerge, pay the conductor our 17 shillings and sixpence, which I'm sure went straight into his pocket, and find a seat. If none, it was the floor in the corridor. On the return journey next day, the Spirit left after our train, and we dared not wait for it, possibly becoming AWOL. At Harman, there was only one driver, and he had to drive the Catholics to Mass in Queanbeyan on Sundays. A call went out for anyone with a driver's licence, and it was interesting that of all those girls, only Phyllis Lane Poole and I responded. Today, every 18-year-old has a licence. There was only one telephone for use by both the girls and the men. Of course, there was a queue. One day, having reached the head of it, I couldn't help overhear this ran. Mum, guess what? I'm getting married tomorrow. Mum, are you there? I pictured Mum prostrate on the kitchen floor. On overnight leave, prior to bringing our bikes to Harman, we would pitch a ride to Canberra. We'd stay at the Service Women's Hostel to luxuriate in hot showers and restaurant, Greek or Chinese, food at 5 shillings. On our way one day, a truck pulled up, Lorna hopping in first, leaving me to sit on the passenger's lap. He was a birdie tradie with a droopy moustache. Having just received our pay, the grand sum of 35 shillings, I was carefully pressing my wallet under my arm. My guy was starting to become fresh when I looked down to see my wallet on my lap. I'd been pressing his hand against my bosom. 18 months after my arrival at Harman, I was selected to do an officer's course at Flinders Naval Depot. It was winter and cold, but we had the luxury of hot showers and a heater. Just before my 21st birthday, 3rd Officer Corbin added a blue stripe to her uniform. I went home for a week's leave, my first, and was then posted to HMAS Magnetic at Townsville. This was the most interesting time of my service. MacArthur had started the pushback of the Japanese, and all information for headquarters at the barracks in Melbourne was channeled through Magnetic. These signals were all top secret, and we cipher officers knew the progress of the war before the big brass at the barracks. In 1944-45, Townsville was buzzing socially as well as militarily. The Hotel Seaview opposite the beach was taken over as an officers' club with a nightly band. I loved dancing and was good at it, and there I met a radio personality who was in the Air Force. I met him every night for a week, and we danced on non-stop until midnight. Like Cinderella, I would leave to get 3 hours sleep before going on watch from 4 till 8 in the morning. If we returned to the Rannery after 8 p.m, we officers had to sign in with the time. This was checked weekly by the captain. My socialising had repercussions in the form of a please explain visit to the captain. I was on watch 11 days and then had the 12th day off and would frequently take the ferry across to Magnetic Island. One night at the club I met a young naval officer who was the captain of a patrol boat. He'd never been to Magnetic, so on my day off he took the boat across the island, anchoring offshore, and we swam off the boat. Strictly not naval procedure. As we moved towards the middle of 1945, the great sea battles were over. The pressure in Townsville was reduced, and I was sent to Victoria Barracks to do a short course in censorship, as it applied to the press and the radio. I was then sent to Sydney, working out of Cuttable at Potts Point. 2 weeks there, and the Japanese surrendered. I was out of a job. With the end of the war, the mobilisation of our girls was the next priority, and the executive officer at Cuttable concentrated on that task. I took over her job, the running of the Rannery. One day, one of our girls came to me saying she was pregnant and wanted to marry the boyfriend, a British seaman, who at that time was in the clink, having gone AWOL to see her. I arranged with Padre, and a wedding ceremony was held in a room adjacent to the cells, with me and her parents the only ones present. I had asked the cook to make a cake and sandwiches, and we held a small reception toasting the happy couple in lemon cordial. Afterwards, I often thought of that naive young girl travelling on a bride ship with her baby to a foreign country with no family support. Sydney then became the home destination for many of our ships, British as well as our own. Blair Bowden was our most senior ran in Sydney, and she was a close friend of mine. She was often invited to social gatherings on board the naval vessels and would take me along as her companion. I recall the night she met her future husband, Englishman Geoffrey Cook, aboard the battleship King George V, at a cocktail party given for the Mountbattens. With our girls returning to Civvy Street, it came my turn. After 3.5 years, I lovingly hung up my uniform and started looking for employment. Unfortunately, my varied responsibilities counted for naught, and I found temporary work difficult until I resumed my interrupted studies in the following year. I was demobilised at the end of May 1946. Much has occurred in the intervening 70 years since those Navy days, and much has been forgotten, yet many memories remain lasting and vivid.
I think that sounds like the first few episodes of a new television series or film in there. I mean, you do tell quite a sort of dashing, adventurous and quite exciting story of that period in your life. Is that how it felt at the time?
Most definitely, especially those Townsville years, and when I was in Sydney too. Mm.
Yeah. And you mentioned that your mother agreed somewhat reluctantly. More broadly, what sort of reaction did you get from family and friends, and what was the prevailing sentiment in society at that time?
Well, it was a little bit early for girls to be going into the services. There were some in the hours. My sister did eventually join the army, and there were girls in the WAFs. But there were not very many in the Navy at that time. Actually, I think the only depot really of any size was at Harmon. But of course, within another 9 months after I joined, they started coming in.
And if I could sort of, fast forward to the 21st century, where there's a lot of focus in the Defence Force around culture and the role of women and the treatment of women.
Well, may I interrupt? But I mean, women today are captains of vessels. They go to sea. Mm-hmm. Big change. Mm-hmm.
Big change.
Yes, fortunately.
Yeah. Thanks so much for sharing your story this afternoon.